My name is Roman Popadiuk. I served as first U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine back in 1992, 1993. It was quite an honor and a professional challenge, and rewarding professional challenge, I should add, to be the first U.S. Ambassador in terms of seeing the country develop as a new country, and in terms of laying the foundations for the infrastructure as well as the policy beginnings of the U.S.-Ukraine relationship. And as a Ukrainian American, it was even emotionally very satisfying and touching because I am of Ukrainian background. My parents came from Ukraine, and I have a lot of relatives in Ukraine, and it was an opportunity for me to touch base with them and visit with them for the first time ever. And so on a professional level as well as a historical level and on a personal level, it was a very rich and rewarding experience. The changes are profound, but the changes are consistent. And let me tell you what I mean by that. One of the things that really struck me about the Ukrainian people was their resilience, their dedication to hard work, and their emphasis on looking to the future and overcoming obstacles. And that's important because over the last 24 years, you've seen these changes slowly taking place with all those strengths leading those changes. What do I mean by that? For example, you take a look at the 2004 Orange Revolution. It was a declaration by the Ukrainian people that the rule of law is in their hands. They have a right to make decisions, and they can actually make a decision. They actually overturned a rigged election. So there's a sense of satisfaction in that. And then when you look at the Maidan Revolution, it was the next step further. It's not only that we, meaning the Ukrainian people, have the power to make decisions, but we actually do make the decision by actually changing the government a second time in a way that we want it to work. And so that resilience was there from day one, and I've kind of marveled at that throughout the 2.5 decades of Ukrainian independence, to see how that resilience, that dedication to hard work and to the future kept coming to the fore and leading to a next stage of development in the Ukrainian political scene. Well, there were a lot of challenges. There were the policy challenges first off in terms of the denuclearization of Ukraine, which you're all very familiar about. But more importantly, I think one of the key challenges that I faced was the need to try to move Ukraine forward on the road of reform. Everyone spoke about reform, but a lot of people didn't undertake reform. And so there was an effort on my part to have the government focus on reform. Remember, back then, when the Soviet Union fell apart, Ukraine was rated by Deutsche Bank, for example, to be the country or the former republic to be the most likely to succeed economically because of its human resources, because of its natural resources. Taking that as a foundation, Ukraine had a great opportunity to move forward, and I saw that opportunity, and so I tried to work with the Ukrainian government, both in the Rada as well as in the presidential administration, to move the process forward. So we always tried to get them to move forward, and we had the first privatization effort when I was ambassador to Ukraine that was AID funded, that the embassy supported. So I was very pleased about that. But those are very first rudimentary steps. And as you can see, even at this stage, Ukraine still has a way to go in terms of the state enterprises that are still in existence, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Well, the need for reforms is a perennial refrain, I think, in Ukrainian politics. And how do you view the current drive for reform?
I think you're accurate in terms of characterizing that it's a perennial issue in Ukrainian politics. We've had numerous administrations from day one saying they're going to reform, they're going to reform. And you've had reformers on the edges and stuff. I think what you see now is a generational change. You still have the words of dedication to reform, but you really have a core base that can really lead that reform. And what do I mean by that? Basically what I mean is you have a new generation of people in their 20s, early 20s to, I say, mid-30s, that have a Western outlook, a global outlook, that were born in Ukraine, that were educated maybe overseas. When I say born in Ukraine, born after independence, I mean, and have a dedication to Ukraine as a country, have a dedication to Ukraine to develop it. And that core group of young people, I think, is the biggest strength that Ukraine has right now to really carry that reform into reality. Ukrainian civil society has always been very big, that there's always been a level of engagement by Ukrainians. As you know, there were a lot of NGOs that started operating very early on in Ukraine. A lot of them were funded and supported or organized by not only Ukrainians in Ukraine, but also diaspora Ukrainians. They came in to help their homeland, so to speak, to develop. So there was a lot of synergies between Ukrainian organizations and organizations from overseas to get Ukrainian society motivated and developed. And of course, through the embassy, we had a lot of programs, the U.S. government in general. AID, for example, had a lot of programs in terms of privatization and helping Ukraine organize itself. So I would say that from early on, there was a very strong base for the development and growth of a civil society in Ukraine. There are numerous successes that Ukraine has had, and not to put them in any chronological order, but you could start off with the fact that Ukraine did denuclearize. There's a lot of talk now that maybe Ukraine shouldn't have given up its nuclear weapons. I, for one, don't think it would have been able to sustain that kind of nuclear force at all. There were some warheads that were leaking, so there were problems. So it showed the world that it can denuclearize. It abides by international standards. I think that's a big plus for Ukraine in terms of the international community. I think the fact that if you look at the first few years of Ukrainian independence, there was a lot of criticism about Ukraine, whether it will survive, whether it will fall apart as a country. I think one of the greatest successes for Ukraine is what actually didn't happen, which was the expectation by a lot of speculation in the West, in the Western media, as well as by observers, that Ukraine wouldn't be able to survive as a country. Well, it survived. Not only did it survive, but it continues to survive, and it's getting stronger each year. So that's a big plus. I think another big success for the Ukrainians, and people don't realize this, is they've had a succession of presidential elections. Obviously, the 2004 Orange Revolution election was all marred, it was rigged, and you had to have a new election, but it was an election. So the success for Ukraine is that power has changed peacefully. It's been kind of rough on the edges, but it's changed peacefully, which shows that there are strong foundations for real democracy in Ukraine. That's a big strength for the country, and I think a lot of people don't give Ukrainians a lot of credit for that. Because if you look at a lot of the surrounding areas, even to the north of Ukraine, you will see that their elections are a little bit differently in terms of who's in and out and who can be prime minister or president. I think I would fall back on something I said early on in this interview, is that the Ukrainian people are very dedicated, they're very resilient people, very patient, very hardworking people. And taking that into an overall view, I would say that the future of Ukraine is good, that Ukraine will overcome these problems, that Ukraine has a lot of talent, both in terms of human talent, but also has a lot of resources that it could tap into, and that Ukraine over time will develop into the strong democracy and the market economy that a lot of people foresee for it, as well as, more importantly, the Ukrainian people themselves foresee for it, and that'll be a very positive member of the world community.